In Wolfman, we see the full effect of an animal-born virus known as the face of the wolf. After Christopher Abbott's character inherits a secluded farm in the mountains, he and his family undergo a haunting, transformative experience. It's only fitting that alongside the new Dracula film Nosferatu, a fresh werewolf flick would be released almost simultaneously, because who doesn't love revisiting the classic question, are you Team Edward or Team Jacob? Welcome to First Time Watching. Please like and subscribe as we dive straight into the explanation. In the remote mountains of central Oregon, at the crack of dawn, Blake's dad tells him to grab his stuff because they are leaving at 7. They are hiking into the mountains to teach young Blake the basics of hunting. His dad is pissed off at the little bastard because every time he tries to teach him something, his attention deficit behind is distracted by something, and even though his methods are a bit harsh, he means well because he worries for his son's safety. A deer shows up, so the speech is over because it's time to hunt some food. But when Daddy takes his eyes off of Blake for a single second, the shit stain already ran off to catch and shoot Bambi. His dad catches up with him and gives him a parental scolding, but again he is distracted by something else. Something bigger is closing in on them. He commands Blake to run towards the deer blind and follows close behind him. Something big climbs the ladder behind them and growls, as Blake's dad can see his breath above the blinds, but the beast gets distracted and runs off. The dad spots the deer's mauled carcass through his rifle's visor and can then see the beast run and shoots, but he misses. He tells Blake it was a bear, and then they go home. But later that night, when his dad thinks Blake is sleeping, he goes into the basement to talk to his buddy Dan. Blake overhears his dad talking about how the face of the wolf is real and that he almost shot it. He asks Dan's help to hunt it down so they can keep their kids safe. 30 years later, Blake lives in the city and is on his way home with his daughter Ginger, but when she shows the same selective hearing he did as a kid, he scolds her just like his dad did to him. But the trauma of his youth immediately reminds him that he should not scream at the kiddo. He apologizes to her and tells her she needs to listen to him because he has one job, and she tells him that is to keep her safe. Then he asks Ginger what her job is, and she tells him to read minds. She puts her hand against her dad's head and tells Blake that he is thinking that he loves his little girl. He is perplexed. That was indeed what he was thinking, and tells her how amazing she is for being able to read his mind. That night, at home, Daddy is doing his stay-at-home parental part when Mommy barges in, still on the phone with her job. Workaholics, right? She hands the mail to Blake and sits down at the table. There is a sealed letter in the mail, and when Blake opens it, it's the official document confirming that his father has passed. With it is a key. After his wife is finally done rambling with her colleague, Blake tells her that his pops has finally been declared deceased by the state of Oregon. He knew it was coming, but that does not make it any easier. Ginger asks her dad if he is sad, and he tells her yes, but he is sad about a lot of things. He would have liked to have known him better, but he always made him afraid of him, and that's why Blake left as soon as he was old enough. The next day, Blake brings his wife lunch at work and asks her, whose name, by the way, is Charlotte, if she's happy, because he thinks they haven't been doing too hot for a while now. And when he got that letter, it finally dawned on him that life is too short to not be a happy family together. He proposes they all take the drive to Oregon to spend the summer in his dad's house and pack up his stuff as a happy little dysfunctional family. But Charlotte doesn't know. She fears that because of all the working, Ginger will not want her there. Blake works his magic and convinces her by giving some compliments. They drive together in a moving van to Oregon and play car games to pass the time. They arrive at a driveway, but Blake can't remember if it's his dad's or not. Ginger spots a man standing in a deer blind close by. He walks towards the car and asks where they are headed. Blake explains who he is and that he is looking for his dad's farm. The guy tells Blake he's been gone for a long time and introduces himself as Derek. He is his dad's buddy, Dan's son. He warns them that they shouldn't be outside after dark in the forest and reveals that the driveway they have stumbled upon is his. He offers to point them in the right direction and gets into the van. It's pitch black outside, and they are still not at his dad's place. They make some casual conversation until Blake can see somebody standing in the middle of the road. He brakes and steers the truck off the path. The truck drives down and gets stuck in the trees. Derek falls out onto the ground, so Blake tells his wife and Ginger to climb on top of the truck. Something is coming. It breaks the window on Derek's side and scratches Blake. Then it jumps down and pulls Derek into the darkness. Blake climbs on top of the van to join his family, and he helps them get down. Then they run the rest of the way towards his dad's house. Something is still closing in on them. They just manage to outrun it and lock themselves inside the house. Blake does a quick sweep of the house and makes his way to the basement. There, he turns on the electricity. All the lights slowly turn on. His plan is to wait till morning and then get the heck out of there. Blake sits with his little girl and does some more of his classic trauma dumping, teaching her about parents being so afraid to scar their kids that they become the reason their kids are scarred. He makes her read his mind and shock her. It's "I love my little girl" again. Hearing them talk from the distance, Charlotte feels like even more of a shit mom. She asks Blake what it was that attacked them, and Blake tells her he doesn't know, but he could swear that that beast was standing on 2 feet like a person. Blake reinforces the door to get them through the night, and then goes back down into the basement to check his dad's old radio to see if maybe they can ask somebody for help. There is a rancid smell in the basement because Blake's dad was making beef jerky in the cooler. At least they got something to eat, and Blake tries a piece, but that is some tough jerky because Blake loses a tooth while biting on it. That's when Charlotte notices the scratch on his arm. She takes out the first aid kit to disinfect and patch it up. Blake wants to make sure his family is safe, so he gets back to reinforcing the place, which wakes up Ginger. Her and her mom walk into the hallway and look at Blake. He tells them to go back to bed because they will need to rest, but they just look at him as if they do not understand what he is saying. They try not to dwell on it and go to bed, but a little later, Blake hears a thumping sound. His wife and Ginger are sleeping. It seems like the sound is coming from upstairs. Blake goes to check it out and finds a spider that looks like it took a plane over from Australia, but that does not explain why the sound of its hairy paws would make this much noise. To Blake, it sounds like 4 guys are marching on the wooden floorboards, but his attention is pointed towards something more dangerous. There is a loud growl outside, and Blake goes back down to check on his family. His wife heard it as well and is wide awake. Something is walking around the house towards the back door. Blake gets closer to listen. Then the beast slams his arm through the bottom of the door and grabs Blake's leg. Charlotte takes the first thing she can find and hits the beast's arm until he releases her husband. The beast runs off, and Blake passes out. A little later, he finally regains his conscious. The outside sounds are even louder than before. He can hear a vague mumbling sound that resembles his wife's voice coming from the basement. But as he gets closer to her, Charlotte's voice does not become clearer to him. She is sending out a distress call. She fears her husband has been infected with something. He can't talk anymore. He doesn't seem to realize he is sick, but nobody answers. She notices Blake standing behind her. His eyes turn darker, and he speaks in a language to his wife that isn't understandable. He could also use some adult diapers because the man is literally peeing himself. Charlotte puts the poor guy to bed and gives him a pen and paper so that maybe he can write his thoughts. He writes the word dying on the piece of paper, but Charlotte does not believe that. She tells him that he is just sick. They will cure him. Charlotte tells Blake how much she loves him and that he can't leave his 2 girls alone, but Blake is not able to understand her. He can see the sadness on her face. Although his vision has gotten better in the darkness, at least he has that going for him. He tries to understand what is happening, but it feels like he is isolated inside himself. Blake's arm is bleeding a lot, so Charlotte decides to check on the wound, but the skin is rotting away. Blake jumps up and runs to the corner of the room and starts gnawing away at his own arm. Another one of his teeth falls out while he chews on himself. He scares himself because he realizes his newfound instinct took over. Charlotte looks defeated and walks towards the window where she spots one of Blake's dad's old cars. She finds the keys and takes a knife out of the kitchen drawer. Then she takes her family outside towards the car as quietly as possible. While Charlotte jump-starts the car, Ginger notices her dad got some new chompers. He looks like an orc. Mommy gets in and tries to start it, and luckily it goes vroom vroom. But when they are finally ready to drive off, she uses the windshield wiper, and there is a beast on top of the hood of their car. He slams his hand through the front window to try and get to Charlotte, but she waves her kitchen knife at him in return. While the beast is distracted, the family runs out of the car and they climb on top of a DIY greenhouse. The beast goes into the greenhouse and slices the roof, creating a hole big enough that Ginger almost falls through. Blake points towards the house as if he wants to tell his wife and kid to run. Then he jumps off the greenhouse to the other side and runs into the woods. Charlotte and Ginger run back to the home and lock themselves inside. Blake returns. It seems like he has won the battle. Charlotte opens the door and they let him back inside. He stumbles towards the living room and lies down on the floor. Ginger walks towards him and puts her hand on his forehead to read his mind. He doesn't understand what she is saying, but he knows what she means. But Blake pukes up blood and a piece of finger, and his animalistic instinct kicks in. He jumps towards Charlotte, but when he notices she is scared, he walks away. He wants to leave, but when he opens the door, the other beast jumps him and attacks. Charlotte, with the support, stabs him in the back, and then she runs away from the fight with Ginger and locks her inside a room. Blake and the beast fight, but Blake is on the losing hand and gets knocked out. Charlotte picks up a fireplace poker and challenges the hairy bastard, and as she distracts him, Blake jumps the ugly beast from the side and bites him in the neck to land the killing blow. As the monster lays there, slowly bleeding out, Blake notices his tattoo. He runs off and leaves the house to go towards the trees, but falls onto the grass to transform into even more of a monster. The forest lights up before Blake's eyes. Meanwhile, inside, Charlotte inspects the beast's body. She recognizes the tattoo. It was Blake's father. That means that his dad wasn't dead, but infected by the face of the wolf, and in turn, he infected his own son with the hairy orc face disease. Ginger just wants her dad back the way he was, but Charlotte can't promise her that. The lights go out, and the girls are now the prey. Blake is standing outside the house, and he tries to warn his wife for what's to come. He breaks into the house through the second-floor window. Charlotte picks up the knife, and she approaches the stairs to check it out, but Blake sneaks up on them. As he tries to touch Ginger, Charlotte cuts him, and they run towards the barn. Blake tries to get in and digs a hole under the door to make an entrance. He can see his wife and daughter clearly, but they can't see how close to them he already is. Charlotte prepared for this, and she put down a bear trap. He steps in it and is now stuck while Charlotte and Ginger run into the forest. Blake bites off his own leg to regain his freedom and follow his family. When the girls notice Daddy is still on their tail, they stumble upon one of the deer blinds. It's close to where they had the accident, and they find Derek's mangled body. She picks up his gun, and they climb into the tower. Blake climbs up the stairs. He is right behind them. The morning sun is coming up, and Blake pops his head to look at his family one last time. He waits as he accepts his fate. Ginger tells her mom that her dad is waiting for all of it to be over. Charlotte shoots her husband, and quickly rushes to his body as he is slowly dying. Ginger puts her hand on his forehead to let him know she loves him. Now, with absolutely no survival experience, these two women are wandering through the forest and stumble upon a beautiful view. After that, there's a very small chance they might actually survive being lost in the more than 30 million acres of Oregon mountain woods. And that's a wrap. While it definitely isn't director Leigh Whannell's best movie, it certainly doesn't disappoint. Wolfman is an original approach to the many werewolf movies that already exist. The things I liked the most were the pacing and the sound design. So, at the beginning, I put this movie against Nosferatu, and even though Dracula is the clear winner, Wolfman is still definitely worth the watch.